Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, with mid-March being an important time for crop insurance decisions, I thought I would at least talk about the severe weather side of this. What you've been looking at here is showing the United States annual counts of tornado reports. And if I zoom in and take a look at this, you've got all the years going back to 2005. Now, I know it might be a little difficult to decipher the colors, but the thick black line shows you the average, which means by the end of the year, we typically have across the U.S. around 1,400 reports of tornadoes. Now, the 2021 numbers are shown in this color, and you can kind of find that line. Let's start at the very end. It's right here. Most of the year, we were at about 90% of average on tornadoes until December 10th and December 15th, where we actually jumped up there close to average. This upcoming year, what does our tornado risk look like? Well, I think that the likelihood of having numbers much closer to normal this year is higher than it was a year ago. I'll explain why in just a few seconds, but right now we're already just a hair below the climatological average, largely due to the big severe weather outbreak we had at the beginning of March. Let's go from there and talk about hail. Hail was interesting last year in that this line right down here shows you the 2021 numbers. We were less than 50% of average by the end of the year. This was a year where a lot of hail, reports were just non-existent. The upper level atmosphere was not conducive to producing big storms that produced lots and lots of hail. Do not expect that again this year. There's a lot of evidence, given where we're coming out with this La Niña, that we should not expect to see that. And finally, what about the severe wind side of this? If we look at our wind reports, a normal year has around 14,000 reports of severe wind damage. Last year, again, if you can find the color, it's right in through here, we were sitting at about 90 to 95% of average throughout much of the year. This is going to be another year where I think that the risk of severe wind damage is going to be elevated above average. And you might ask, well, why am I so confident? Why do I think that's going to be the case? I think that's going to be the case because I think we're not going to see a late spring, early summer jet stream pattern like we saw last year. One where we had a big ridge that got blocked up here over the west and the flow was highly amplified with a lot of north-south flow coming right into the midsection of the United States. You see, this was the wrong setup. You get a lot of severe weather when weak waves come over the mountains and eject into the plains. We were not getting that last year. So we saw much of the plains go through a spring and early summer without severe weather, normal severe weather. And east of that, where the flow did come out of the southwest, well, a lot of that southwest flow was really coming as like an overrunning front right here. So we ended up flooding. Do you folks remember that? Those of you that are watching my video here in like Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, we had those rainfall events on this overrunning precipitation where we got 6, 8, 10, 12 inches of rain at the end of June into early July. That's my reasoning. I do not believe we're going to see the same setup this upcoming year. One thing we do have to also talk about is hurricane frequency, because 2021 once again exhausted the name list. The worst of all was Hurricane Ida, which came in through here in late August at Category 4 intensity, did about $75 billion worth of damage. Well, these ocean temperatures we've got forecast for later this fall, out in September, maintain above average ocean temperatures for the Atlantic. Now, this is important because the warmer those ocean temperatures are in the Atlantic, the greater the energy transfer is out of the ocean through both evaporation and then eventually condensation, and then sensible heat flux to fuel these tropical systems. So given the ocean temperature pattern, we would increase the likelihood of having an above average season. There's another component to this as well, and this is something I've struggled with. The models earlier were hinting at the more rapid development of El Nino-like conditions. That's the warm water you see here. If the El Nino were to come on quickly, that would reduce hurricane risk by increasing wind shear in the Atlantic. But some of the latest data suggests that this, transition out of La Nina is going to be much, much slower. And the likelihood of developing a full-bore El Nino going into fall is much lower now. And again, I stress, I have really, really struggled with this forecast of La Nina. And this is what I've really missed in terms of my forecast performance. Earlier, do you remember back in spring I was calling for more of an east-focused La Nina over here, a lot of cold water? We've since seen more, or I guess I should say a lack of upwelling and some warmer temperatures show up here, while the trades have really accelerated throughout this early March time period, giving rise to cooler water back into this area. And I just didn't see it. I just didn't forecast it that well. And what's gone on is that this has affected the MJO, this has affected our March and now our April forecasts, and we need to know how long is this going to continue. So let me show you a couple things. The European model, which I heavily favor, has kind of a companion model we run here in the United States. It's called the CFS V2, Climate Forecasting System version 2. And its forecast for Niña region 3.4, and again, that's just this area basically right in through here, okay? Its forecast for ocean temperatures in there. Now from April, look at this, April to October, keep it down there about 1 degree to 1.5 degrees below normal. Now there's good spread on this, but bringing this up into neutral conditions or even into El Nino conditions by fall is nowhere in the CFS-V2 model. Now we know that the CFS-V2 has a persistence bias, which means what it's got now, it just tends to keep. So we see that happening right in through here. But what's important to do is to compare this to other forecasts. And the first one I'll show you is the European model. You see, it forecast the dip back down in March and then was projecting it to go through spring back up into INSO-neutral conditions. That's ocean temperatures between half a degree above and half a degree below average. But you can see still pretty large spread. A few of the ensemble members took it back down, most of them kept it at neutral, and a few of them brought it into weak El Nino. But the point is that this model did not flatline this. All of the ensemble members showed some sense of warming through spring. Now, we can look at how well the European model's done. In fact, let's just go back to last year. Go back to March of 2021, we could see that it also forecast that. But the dotted line tells you what actually happened. It stayed on the cooler side of the forecast envelope and then eventually went back into La Nina. And I look at this and I start to get concerned. And I brought this up last week. You know, is there a chance that we do favor something like this where we go into next fall with our third La Nina in a row? I can't take that out of play just yet. And some supporting evidence of that comes from the IRI Multi-Model Forecast Group. Now, when you look at this graphic, you've got timeline on the bottom here. So these are months. So this was like May, June, July. And the blue bar represents the probability of having La Nina. So by late spring, early summer, best chances we're still dealing with a fading La Nina. The chance of an INSO-neutral situation coming was about 35%. When did they become equal? Summer into fall. So at this point, the long-range forecast statistical model that the IRI group runs says that the probability of keeping INSO-neutral or weak La Nina through summer and fall is the best chance. They've only given it about a 15% chance by October, November, December of developing El Nino. Now this is critical. This is going to affect jet stream performance. This is going to affect the drought situation in the west. This is going to affect where our summer ridging could possibly be. And this is definitely going to affect the hurricane season. If we keep INSO-neutral conditions plus warm ocean temperatures in the Atlantic, our hurricane risk is going to be elevated again this year. But again, that is something I have very much struggled with. And I think the models have struggled with this quite a bit as well. Let's do some quick model verification. Last February, mid-February, this was the forecast released by the European model. It kept conditions very wet from the mid-south through the eastern Corn Belt and into New England. We were dry along the coast, drier in the southern plains and western Corn Belt. How well did this verify? Well, this is what we've seen over the last 30 days. Okay, it found that and did quite well with it. But getting the extent of the drier weather in the plains, this was under forecast. The models were much drier than what you see here. And while recent rains are starting to correct the problem here and more that's on the way is going to really help out with that, this was also not forecast to be as dry as it was. Now in the west, the models did a very good job, except in what you see in Montana, although I need to put a caveat onto this. It looks as though it was wet in Montana, doesn't it? But the reality is they have exceptional drought in Montana right now because every time it does precipitate, we have it followed by warm conditions and 60 to 70, even 80 mile an hour winds. So this area is definitely in drought, and the map does not show that very well. So I think about all of that and ask where it's going because I've missed out on the redevelopment. My forecasts have missed on the redevelopment of this La Nina on these stronger trades. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means this. If the ocean temperatures are going back down and possibly hovering around 1 degree, that means we've got to keep those trade winds a bit stronger. And if the trade winds are a bit stronger, that means that'll control where the MJO is. And I would like to show you what the latest forecast suggests. Today on the 14th, going through the end of the month, the MJO is expected to come out of phase 2, slowly move through phase 3, and nudge into phase 5. But then do you notice how after that we kind of lose our stronger signal? There's a lot of research that supports that during this time of year, sometimes the MJO, almost 40% of the time, fails to make it past, well, Indonesia, getting here into the Pacific Ocean. And that's important because this is what the models have been doing. They've been taking the MJO out, for example, bringing it through the Indian Ocean, sweeping it over toward what we call the maritime continent, that's Australia, and then blasting it into phase 5, only to see the verification show that once it gets toward the maritime continent, it fades back into neutral conditions or back into the null space. Now, why this is important is this is what happened from February into early March. And I believe that this is going to go on to repeat going into the end of March and early April. If it breaks through and comes all the way out into phases 6, 7, and 8, that would represent a substantial change away from what the models are forecasting. But I think we're going to see the MJO spending a lot of time doing this. Ready? Coming out, collapsing, coming back out in the Indian Ocean, and maybe collapsing. Meaning that if it spends more time over in this area, the pattern we've been seeing is going to go on wash, rinse, repeat. Now, we know something about this. That would tell us that the La Niña's got a good grip on things. And in March and April, if there is that kind of pattern, we tend to be wetter here, tends to be an active storm track in through here, and wetter in the Pacific Northwest. No subtropical jet for California, so drier. No good southwest flow coming through the southern plains and central plains, so drier. And this will be a wild card area down in the southeast. That's what history would tell us. So we're not surprised when we see the new forecast from late March to late April showing above average precipitation here, active mid-south, eastern Corn Belt, Great Lakes into the southeast of New England, but drier risks here. Now, as I stated on Friday, we did get what was expected. This is no longer nearly as dry as the previous forecast was for the same time period. It's been wetter than it previously was. But still, the models are just unable to get rid of persistence in this area. There is some good news. I've got 2 systems coming out in this area in the next 10 days. We need to see more of that. We need to see the atmosphere continue to break that down. But I'll show you the long-range temperature forecasting in this video, but I wanted to bring you up to speed with these things. Now, since we've been doing some forecast verification and we've now looked out through the end of April on precipitation, let's at least talk about how well the models did lately. This was what occurred over the last 7 days. Heavy rains from the Mid-South, Eastern Corn Belt, getting over to the Appalachian Mountains into New England, and the heaviest rains down here in Florida where we saw some flooding. Did the models pick up on this pattern? They did really well. I mean, take a look at this, which was forecast a week ago, and this is the verification. Now, thinking about that, what about the snowfall side of it? Because the models brought snow into the Rockies, some snow in the Cascades, one band right in through here, and then the heavy snow from the weekend nor'easter that went into that area. Did that verify? It did, quite well. So I've been impressed with the near-term performance of the models. But all this snow that came into New England, into the Midwest in the last 3 days, well, it's gone. If you just take a look at this satellite animation, I'll just go back to this morning. Take a look at the snow here and watch it just melt on the warmth coming into the day. See it just disappearing? And what are we watching now? Well, right now, we're keeping an eye down here in Texas. Let's go in there and have a look. These storms coming out of eastern Texas, I want a wider view. How about that one? There we go. These storms coming into eastern Texas right now, quite strong. And by the way, look at what's happening behind them. Focus here and here. As I go back, look at those 2 areas. We got a wildfire right there that's probably being blown by 30, 40 mile an hour winds. And there's a dust storm coming into this part of western Texas. Can you see the dust now? Look right into there and watch it move. So there's still a lot of dry air in the plains that we're concerned about. Now, thinking about where this is going, we got 3 systems to keep an eye on. The first one is here, severe weather risk. It's going to move to the southeast. There's then a wave that comes down like this into Colorado later this week and ejects into the plains. I'll show you that one. But the third one is we're going to see multiple coastal fronts coming into the west, and we're really happy. I'm really happy to see this much precipitation from Northern California getting into Oregon and Washington, a region that is in drought right now. But that severe weather threat is over the south, and we need to see what's going to happen here by going to our high-res. Oh, sorry about that. Let's bring that back. There we go. Our high-res There we go. Our high-res NAM model. So the storms coming right here this afternoon to this evening into eastern Texas, likely a multi-hazard threat from hail to severe straight-line winds and the risk of tornadic thunderstorm development. Those storms move into Louisiana tonight. In the overnight hours, this is going to be a night of not much sleep here with all the lightning we're expecting from this. Let's just keep an eye down here because that system through Tuesday, getting here into Tuesday night and Wednesday, spreads into the southeast. And unlike this morning's model runs, we now see that wave opens up into North Carolina and spreads rain through the Appalachian Mountains into Virginia as well. Now, while all that was going on, come back. Coastal front comes into the Pacific Northwest, brings rain to the Columbia Basin, snow to the Blue Mountains, the Northern Rockies, and the Cascades, but doesn't deliver the moisture to Montana. What that eventually does is that wave comes and sits right here over Colorado by Thursday night, delivering some snow, and right in through here is where the front sits on which this next system will show up. To do that, I got to go look out at our next two models, the GFS and the European. Just want to point something out. The GFS, multiple times in January, February, and now into March, has had these time periods where its accuracy and its skill has just dropped off. And even though the models right now seem to be performing about equally, they diverge significantly on these next two systems. So let's take a look. We've already seen through Wednesday. Now I want you to keep your eye right here on the next system coming out of Colorado. Both models, by the time we get into Thursday morning, are bringing snow into the high plains. But the GFS puts the low here, and the European is slower and back farther to the west. Now what's the result? You watch. The GFS is going to take the low like that. The European is going to take it like this, and they're going to split in a big way on this next system. So through Friday, getting into Saturday. Do you see that? Thursday, Friday, Saturday. You can see the two models taking entirely different trajectories. One delivering a whole bunch of snow into the western Corn Belt than Wisconsin and Michigan. The European not doing anything like that at all, staying farther to the south. And then the European brings all the snow here into New England, whereas the GFS this weekend brings it all into Ontario and Quebec. So much different solution here. They both then bring another wave into the west. See it here in the European? There it is. It's great to see precipitation in the west. But this next wave, which is going to emerge sometime next Monday, again, the European slower, farther to the south. The GFS farther to the north, stronger. So more snow in the high plains of Wyoming into Montana. And the European's got none of it. It's much farther to the south. So these two models are completely flip-flopping here, not flip-flopping, diverging, in the pattern. And what I'm concerned about with this next wave is probably next Monday night through next Wednesday. This whole area is going to be on the lookout for strong to severe storms. All of this in through here. So let's be prepared for that next week. To show you the model differences, this is the ECMWF 12Z forecast for the next 7 days. And here's the GFS. Find your location and watch. Ready? GFS, European. GFS, European. Taking the difference, look at how much wetter the GFS is in through here, while the European, shown in greens here, is wetter from the Mid-South and New England and along the East Coast. Major differences in these next couple of waves coming through. Same thing on snowfall. That's the next 7 days of snowfall from the European. They agree better in the west, but not in the east. See what the heavy snow is here in the European? Not in the GFS. It's north. And remember, the GFS dumps snow here in Iowa, northern Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan. But they're the same out in the west. I really like the agreement in the west. Just terrible east of the Rockies. When did they come back into agreement? Well, they actually get their act together in the ensembles for this system coming out here on the 22nd, right in through here. Both models have this. And it sweeps through, and this is why we're going to watch next Monday night through next Wednesday night for the risk of severe storms in this whole region. Because the models are suggesting that that area is going to open up the Gulf, and we're going to see a lot of transport of moisture, and we're keeping this whole region wet going into that time period. Again, California on the drier side of things, no subtropical jets showing up, and it's also in the GFS. I mean, that's really good week 2 model agreement. European, GFS. How about those temperatures? Well, models did a great job predicting this. This is the March 8th through March 13th extent of freezing air. So in gray, that's everywhere that saw a temperature at or below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Models did a really good job predicting the extent of the cold air through Texas, the Gulf Coast, and even in northern Florida, where we saw frost. And this really impacted crops down here. Well, where are the temperatures going? Let's take a look here. Monday's high temperatures, we've already seen these, so let's get into Tuesday. Big warm-up happens out ahead of that next system that's coming through. This is the first of the two of them coming through. So you can see 70s, even 80s down here in the southern plains and 60s here in the western Corn Belt extending over to the eastern Great Lakes. By Thursday, the system's winding up. That's the snow in Colorado. The warmth is out ahead of it. But the cool down is temporary. And as we go into the weekend, another warm-up is happening as the next system takes shape for early next week. So this is the setup for the big Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday system that comes out of Colorado and sweeps over to the east. But what do the temperatures do after that? Well, day 5 through 10 still shows more mild conditions than cold. And even what you have over here in the west, this is much closer to average. And then out there day 10 through 15, this is where we're going to have to start to watch for some change. So come back to what I told you at the beginning. Remember that whole wash, rinse, repeat cycle? I think the colder air is going to come back into this area at the end of March and beginning of April. And there's some good evidence for that. March 28th through April 4th, see the colder air returning to the east? It's also in the CFSV2. So I'm going to watch this carefully progressing forward. We'll give you an update on Thursday, but there's a lot of moving pieces right now. And again, I think this has a lot to do with the La Niña not fading as fast as I thought. Talk to you again on Thursday. Thanks.